Colts Nation. So, we've got a little bit of talking to do today. It's been a little bit since I've been able to sit down and record a full show. I believe I didn't even record one after the Josh Downs injury. I believe the last time I recorded a show was before Josh Downs got hurt, but that's the past. Now we're in the present, right? And we have seen a full preseason game out of the Indianapolis Colts. And as a football fan, right, Colts aside, man, does it not feel great to be watching football this weekend, preseason or not? I mean, week one, anything works, right? If you're anything like me, you don't even care about any other sports. So when the football offseason is going on, in terms of televised sports, something to get behind, you have the UFC fights on a Saturday. And other than that, I mean, there's really not all that much to be excited about. But here we are now with the Colts finally playing some real football. And let me just say, if we're to be honest, I would be lying if I said that what we saw in this week one preseason game was encouraging. Now, ultimately, what we see in a preseason week one game or a week one preseason game is not the be-all, end-all, right? It wouldn't be wise for us to come out of this game with some crazy takeaways and just be like the end of the world is happening or anything like that, right? But with that said, we don't want to ignore what it is that we saw either, particularly from the guys that we expect to make an impact, the guys that we're leaning on, right? The starters and kind of the people that we expect to be quote-unquote semi-starters, part-time starters, the people that are going to be rotating into those 11 guys that are on the field, both on offense and defense for us, come the regular season. After all, if we had played well in this game, we'd be coming out of it with glowing reviews and we'd be saying all types of crazy stuff, right? So it's only fair that if we watched that game and we didn't like what we saw, that we're honest and fair in the assessment of this team as we get closer to the season. That's what we do. Many times it's been positive and light and cheery from me over on this end since I've started the show. And I think a lot of people attribute that to me just being a fan and trying to always look at things positively. No, that's not the case. I just so happen to have felt that way at that time. Even when the consensus was doom and gloom for much of Colts Nation, I've kind of felt like I stood alone as somewhat almost of a contrarian in Colts Nation and saw it a little bit differently. I felt that overall, my positive outlook on this team has aged well to date in terms of, since I've had the show, right? But again, as I was saying, on a day like today, it's kind of hard to feel very good about where the Colts currently stand, if I'm to be 100% honest with you, right? We don't want to make too much of it. You don't want to make a mountain out of a molehill, but at the same time, the other side of that coin is you don't want to make a molehill out of a mountain, right? You don't want to ignore what it is that you're seeing just because it's preseason. And, you want to also be honest about, hey, this is what we wanted to see going into this game. Did we see it or did we not? We wanted to see the first and second string offense come in and execute. They did not do that very well, plain and simple. I think it really spoke to how important Josh Downs is to this offense. We'll talk about it. The defense looked all right in this game, right? Nobody expects the Denver Broncos to be a high-powered offense by any means. In fact, we kind of expect them to stink, okay? So it's really hard to call it a great look for the defense. That side of the ball, may I add, in the preseason, there's a lot more to look at, right? Primarily because we know the D-line is going to have a steady rotation, so a lot of those guys can be out there when it's important in important games during the regular season, from the first-team guys to the third-team guys. That defensive line we expect to have a rotation, so a lot of those guys are important basically into the third quarter and all of that stuff. And then, of course, on the secondary, we still don't have a bunch of clarity as to exactly who it is that's going to be the full-time starters for this team. I like some of what I saw on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't like some of what I saw on the defensive side of the ball. We'll get into all of that, but before we do, you know what it is? I got to introduce myself. My name is Justin. This right here is the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. As always, I ask anyone watching on YouTube and enjoying the show, go ahead, shoot a like. It's going to help me get out to as many Colts fans as humanly possible. Audio listeners, shoot a 5-star review. Actually, for those of you on the YouTube, please, if we have to get the audio show out to more people, I've left a link to the Spotify and the Apple Podcast descriptions, or really the Apple Podcast and Spotify pages for this podcast. If you watch on YouTube and enjoy the show, if you could just click one of those links, either one, and just leave a review and kind of help me get out to a little more people on the audio end, that would be very greatly appreciated. We're trying to get to 3,000 subscribers over here on the YouTube page before the season starts. That's going to be a race, but we're working on it. If you keep coming back, enjoying the content, perhaps the days today. But most importantly, let's talk about Colts football. It's all we do over here. No Hoosiers, no Pacers, Nothing like that. All football, only football, Colts football, all the freaking time. It's what we do. And let's start on the offensive side of the ball. And I got to say, right off the bat, I am concerned to some degree. And this is why, okay? I believe in the last episode it was, right? It might have been the last episode that I made. I went out of my way to make a point that the defense had been winning against this offense in training camp. And when talking about why I felt that might be, I concluded perhaps it was because this defense was a little bit better than what we thought it was. Now, of course, this was before Josh Downs ever went down with that ankle injury. Now, I'm not going to sit here and open up the discussion about whether or not like Nick Cross should be benched, all that type of stuff, right? Some of you guys who are saying we have no depth at safety are saying Nick Cross should be cut. Tell me how that makes any sense, all right? The guy's fighting for his livelihood. It was a stupid play, albeit none of us saw it, right? I can't find the video. If you have one, please let me know. So I can't sit here and be honest in my assessment as to whether, like, what happened on that play. But I will say, obviously, it's a 7-on-7. You don't want to tackle a guy to the ground. But if we're to be fair to Nick Cross and have a little bit of grace, okay, the guy is fighting for his livelihood. He's not guaranteed a spot in this starting lineup, okay? So I respect the fact that he comes out there and competes. Neither here nor there. Really, that's a digression entirely. Back to the first team offense in this preseason game. If you ask me, without Josh Downs, they looked a little bit lost, okay? If we're to just be straightforward with it. You saw a little bit of mixing and matching in the slot with the rookies and Anthony Gould and A.D. Mitchell. Even Kylan Granson supplemented some of those reps, at least schematically, in terms of the space they wanted him to take up on the field, those short and intermediate type routes. Okay, fine. That's all good and well. The good news is that given the nature of Josh Downs' injury, that high ankle sprain, we don't expect to see all that much of this offense without him early in the season, but he may miss a game or two, right? But nonetheless, that's what we're looking at. Anthony Richardson did not make the plays that mattered in limited action in this game. Missed 2 third-down opportunities to Granson, both unfortunately related to inaccuracies, as some might say. If I'm to take that a little bit further for you and explain really what it is that you saw, it was this. To me, sure, the passes were not accurate, okay? But that isn't because he's an inaccurate thrower, and it's not because he doesn't have the arm to make those throws. That's not at all what it is. When you're seeing a guy that's inaccurate in game speed but could come out in 7-on-7s and absolutely light it up like he did in the final training camp practice before this game, here's what you're looking at least in my estimation. What I saw, it looked to me Anthony Richardson was not super comfortable with the speed that the game was moving, whether it be the progression he had to go through if they're trying to give him more advanced looks now than maybe they did to start last season, or just the looks that the defense gave him. Whatever it was, he just did not seem to be going through his reads quick enough, which ultimately, as a quarterback, when you're not confident in what you're seeing, it's hard to be confident in the throw. That is what affects accuracy. It's not, I mean, sometimes it's mechanics. In Anthony Richardson's case, I'm not sure that's what it was. That lack of confidence in what you're seeing ultimately is going to make it less likely for you to make a quality throw. That's the best explanation I could give you. That's just the truth. You could ask any quarterback that. Not that I am one. No big deal. I am a flag football quarterback, and I've played some bad games, and I can tell you it's not because I can't throw. It's because sometimes what you're seeing is just not it's not working out, right? So I thought that that's what we saw out of Anthony Richardson. Both throws to Granson, he had plenty of time to make those throws. Just flat out missed the first one, okay? And that was like a third and it was a third and long, right? So it was a tough conversion to begin with. Flat out missed that throw, and he kind of double clutched it or something to that effect. Again, just looked like he second guessed what he was seeing on that play. And then that drag on third down just got there real late, and it was behind him, right? It was a throw that if it was on time based on where he placed it, that would have been the right spot to throw that ball. Because he was not on time, it was behind him, and he did not let him catch it in stride. He had more than enough time to make that throw, and he just missed it, quite frankly. And instead, Kylan Granson was not able to continue running with that and get that first down, and then you don't get, and then you have not 3 and outs, but 2 drives that were really lackluster from this offense. Now, again, we could contribute what we saw out of Anthony Richardson to rust. We can contribute that to inexperience. We could contribute that to Josh Downs not being on the field. All fair, all valid. That's not a cope, okay? That's like a reasonable football take to be like, those things are all true. Here's the problem with that, though. I don't expect any of those things to change by week 1 against the Texans, right? A week in which we have not won since the year 2013 against a team who is odds on the favorite to win this division, and for good reason. It just seems like in the near term, aka week 1, which is primarily my concern, one of these teams is going to be much closer to a finished product than the other, And hint, hint, it's not us, okay? So full transparency, let's prepare for it, okay? My gut is telling me that the Texans, and I know this is early, but I just have a feeling. I think we're going to get our ass handed to us in that game, to be 100% honest with you. Again, we're relying on a lot of young guys coming off of injury. You're talking about Anthony Richardson, obviously having missed the full season. He's got to work back up to speed, okay? Juju Brents, he is another guy who, once again, albeit we don't think it's a significant shoulder injury, could not play in this game because of a shoulder. He's going to come out, and that's going to be what it is. Dallas Flowers coming off that injury. We'll get into that. Yeesh, right? That wasn't great. Point being, it just doesn't feel like we're prepared to come into this season week one and really play at a high level. Now, particularly, right, if Josh Downs doesn't play. Now, for the sake of being fair and all of that type of stuff, and I guess trying to be a little bit more optimistic, you know, there were elements of the offense that were not put on display in this game, particularly ones that involve Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor's running ability. Those are the types of things that we don't want to see them pull out in preseason anyway, right? Let's not subject Anthony Richardson to any more damage than he needs to be subjected to. You see Jonathan Taylor out there with the Guardian cap, not for anything. Put one on Anthony too while you're at it, huh? That's just my take. I know it's their choice, but it is what it is. So perhaps those elements of the offense, I'm talking about essentially the read option between those two, can be a grounding element for this option or this offense when they actually end up getting utilized in the regular season to kind of keep this offensive unit as a whole a bit more consistent while we continue to work out what I expect to be some kinks in this passing game. Other important notes from the offense in this game. A.D. Mitchell immediately got a reception from Joe Flacco in preseason, or rather in training camp. Those two's connection looked to be like a very, very real thing. It was nice to see that translate onto the field real quickly. A.D. Mitchell looks far more comfortable playing on the outside than in the slot, in my estimation. Anthony Gould, speak of the rookies, he's very, very fast. Very, very fast. I think he's the type of guy that can make some important plays for this offense throughout the course of the season, and obviously on special teams as well. Tight end room. It seems as of right now, the team is most confident in Mo Alley-Cox and Kylen Granson. Presumably only 4 roster spots on this team at the tight end position, and there's 5 guys right now that we have. As of now, looks like perhaps Drew Ogletree is going to be the odd man out. That's just after one game of action, of course. And finally, I really, really like DJ Montgomery at wide receiver. I'm not sure if the plan's to keep 5 guys, to keep 6 guys, but whatever it is, I don't love his chances of not being poached off our practice squad. And I think he has some real good playmaking ability. I like DJ Montgomery, man. I kind of think he's a dog, and I think he's one of those guys, when you talk about depth pieces, really sticks out from some of the other guys. And I would like to see them find a place for him on this roster when the time comes. We'll have to see. Now let's head over to the defense, and we're going to start with the positives. Laiatu Latu, he looks like a real issue out there. Now, sure, no sacks on paper. That's all good and well, but he really passes the eye test with flying colors. I mean, does he not? The guy he just gets it done in a variety of different ways. I thought he looked real good in his first showing out there. The defense as a whole, I thought, was opportunistic and played with good speed. The speed that they're playing with speaks to their comfort level in the system, which ultimately speaks to the benefits of that continuity that has been one of the major, major buzzwords of this offseason. Kenny Moore did Kenny Moore things. Fantastic. I thought Cameron McGrone played real well at linebacker. There was no point where I was cursing at the safeties, which is a good thing. But as it currently stands, it seems like who plays where kind of depends on the situation, right? Down, distance, formation, et cetera, all that type of stuff. It looks that the only true starter that we have at safety is Julian Blackmon. Sometimes he'll play free. Sometimes he'll play strong. It looks like when he's playing free, they like Ronnie Harrison Jr. out there at strong safety. And when he's playing strong, they like Nick Cross out there at free safety. But it kind of looks like a mix and match type of situation. Everyone else other than him just rotates in as needed, which is kind of a decent segue into the negatives of this defense and what I saw. What the plan is, if he goes down, your guess is as good as mine. In my estimation, as it currently stands, it appears they don't have one. I guess just hope and pray that the other guys step up, which as of right now, it doesn't seem like anyone's been able to do, right? So that's not a great thing. Dallas Flowers, goodness gracious, right? He looked like he was in over his skis in this game. Coming off that Achilles tendon rupture, not even 12 months removed, actually, okay? So it's not like he's full form, and it's not like this is the Dallas Flowers. It's not like this is the finished product, right? Dallas Flowers in week 6 and 7 and 8 is going to look much different than the guy that we're looking at right now. That being said, woof, right? I mean, that was a really, really tough showing. I mean, he struggled tremendously in this game. I thought he looked real good before the injury last year, so I think he can get there. But the questions we had about how he would look kind of in the early parts of this season, so far, not so good. In fact, real bad, may I add. And Dallas Flowers is not exactly a guy that's buried in our depth chart, right? So if we're looking at half full, I suppose he can only get better from here. But or at least you'd hope, right? Now, staying in the secondary, again, we didn't allow a lot of big plays. Great, fine. But there wasn't exactly anything that I saw that made me feel like this team is going to look any different on the defensive side of the ball, at least in the secondary this year, than it did last year. Much of the same in terms of it being a little bit too easy for the offense to get completions for most of this game. And again, you're talking about playing quarterbacks like Jared Stidham, Zach fucking Wilson, and Bo Nix, who's kind of an electrifying rookie, and that's all good and well. Maybe he has a great season and it kind of looks a little bit different. But again, no Juju Brents, fine. But, you know, he would have had to have been completely elite for it to look much different than what it is that we saw. We still have far more questions than answers than we do in the secondary. Not a great place to be at this juncture, even if it's week 1 preseason. We're less than a month away from the first regular season game. And, you know, it is what it is, right? Not wanting to overreact to this game, I can't help that my gut feel is my gut feel. Right now, it feels like this team is poised to kind of have a slow start to this season. Now, we've seen that before. It's not unfamiliar territory. In fact, we've seen incredibly successful seasons in Indianapolis come after slow starts, but this year is the best that this division has looked on paper in a meaningful period of time, really for as long as I could remember. So you do wonder if we'd be able to come back from a slow start this season the same way we've been able to in other seasons, right? And that is what it is. Only one divisional game in the first month of the year. Of course, that week 1 matchup against the Texans. So I suppose that's a little bit of a silver lining, but we'll have to see. To try to end this thing on a positive note, I will say this. Here's what's not changed, okay? I obviously feel great about Shane Steichen as our head coach. I still firmly believe in Anthony Richardson's character and his talent as the franchise quarterback for this team. Any concerns I'm expressing today are far more about the near term than they are the long term. But with that said, ultimately, the near term is what's in front of us. And quite frankly, it's all that's real, right? Everything else is a projection and a guess and all of that type of stuff. So we're going to have to see how it plays out. All I know is that we're going to have to be better than that we just showed in that first preseason game. I'm not sure how many real game opportunities, if any, they're going to have on the offensive side of the ball, particularly to build some momentum and some confidence headed into the season. But something tells me, based off of what we just saw that that's not going to be the last we see of that first string offense. Something tells me Steichen is going to want to give the starters a little bit more run than what we saw in that one. But we're going to have to see. Without further ado, that was an incredibly pessimistic episode of the Riding the Bench Colts podcast. Like, subscribe if you can bear to do it after me shitting on our team for about 18 minutes. And yeah, that's it. Until next time, go Colts.